Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. Already we're a third of the way through October, but this month, at least in the southern half of the United Kingdom, it has often felt more like summer than autumn. I think though things are set to change as we head through the coming days. So let's begin by taking a look at the view across Europe and the North Atlantic. The animation runs from 18 GMT, Wednesday the 11th. At the outset, there are some heavy outbreaks of rain affecting parts of Wales and central England. To the north, it's cooler, a few showers there over Scotland. To its south, though, it's quite muggy and overcast, temperatures still above the October norm. As I run this sequence, what we see is heavy outbreaks of rain at times through the first few days affect much of England and Wales, an area of low pressure there. But as it pulls away, much colder air from the Arctic starts to sweep southwards across all parts of the United Kingdom, just in time for the weekend. A little bit of white shading showing up there over Scotland. That's indicating sleet or snow over the mountains there. There could also be some frost to look out for this weekend, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. Running the sequence forward though, what we see is high pressure becomes dominant. It moves across the UK. Low pressure there to the south, probably staying far enough away for it to remain dry even in southern counties. And then on this particular computer model run, the high pressure migrates towards Scandinavia, it builds there, and an easterly flow moves across much of Western Europe and the United Kingdom. So quite chilly really through the second half of the week, if this is to be believed. But I think there's quite a lot of uncertainty about just where that high pressure will end up. With this type of pattern as well, there's a greater risk of rain in the west and the south as areas of low pressure and weather fronts try to push in from the Atlantic. So quite a lot taking place there through the first week. Here's the air temperature sequence associated with the same GFS model run. Remember on these charts, the oranges, yellows are indicating warm air, the blues and purples, the cold air. And as I run this, what we see is in the short term, that blue air mass moves southwards across the UK. High pressure then builds in through the rest of the week, as I've mentioned. And there is some quite cold air moving down there from a northeast into Western Europe. It's a proper Scandinavian high pattern, which is being shown by the GFS run. But it wouldn't take much of that high pressure just to slip away a little bit further eastwards, a little bit further south, and we'd end up with more of a south or a southwesterly flow pushing up across the UK, and temperatures would be correspondingly somewhat higher. Well, let's take a look at the 2 metre temperatures based on that GFS model, and just assuming that it's correct for a moment. 15 GMT, Thursday the 12th, it's still rather warm really in the south, 20-21 Celsius there in the London area, but cooler in the north. We've got the potential for rain in central parts at this point. Going forwards to Friday, and that warmer air is really still hanging on in southern counties. It doesn't want to let it go, does it? 21, not out of the question there in the southeast. Single figures though as you head across the northern half UK, Northern Ireland, quite chilly as well. Going forwards to the weekend, and by now that colder air has moved down across all parts of the UK, so values which were 20-21 in the southeast are now topping out at about 12 Celsius, so almost a drop of 10 degrees over a relatively short period of time as that colder air mass sinks southwards, and it's distinctly chilly there up in Scotland, 4 or 5, so the possibility, as I've already said, of sleet or snow being mixed into the showers, especially over high ground. Also, the frost risk increases, as I mentioned. These are forecast minimums on Sunday morning, down to or just below freezing point in much of the north, even in southern and central regions, 2, 3 or 4 degrees, cold enough for a ground frost. So if you're heading out on Saturday night, you may want to check the short range forecast just before doing so, because there is still time for this to vary, but you could be needing your winter woolies. Moving forwards to Tuesday, it's still quite chilly. Temperatures have nudged upwards now in southern and central regions, 12 or 13, 11 or 12 there in Scotland. And at this point, we've got that easterly flow starting to feed across the UK. The Mogreps G ensemble showing Temperatures, this one's for London, indicates good support for a general evolution of GFS was shown, so a colder pattern through after the first couple of days, making it down into the south. The key point really is to note that the individual lines here are staying tightly packed together, suggesting a high degree of confidence in the ensemble that that is what will be happening. Sometimes these runs, if they diverge and go off in different directions, that would suggest a low degree of confidence in any given scenario. But here, maximums of around 12 Celsius, dipping down a little bit there to about 10 or 11. Overnight lows in London around 5 degrees. So go out of town into the home counties, into more rural areas, as I've just suggested, a couple of degrees lower, 2 or 3 Celsius lower, ground frost is definitely a possibility. Rainfall. Unusually here, perhaps, most of the rain has been shown in southern and central parts of the UK through days 0 to 5. The ECM chart there on the left and the GFS on the right in reasonably good agreement with each other. The likelihood of some distinctly wet conditions in parts of England and Wales through this period. That's much drier in the north as it stays under that cooler air mass. We've got those areas of low pressure pushing up from the southwest, moving eastwards across England and Wales, which are bringing the likelihood of heavy bursts of rain at times through the first few days. Jumping ahead to the 0 to 10 day charts, totals across England and Wales haven't really increased a great deal through this period. High pressure likely to be dominant, although there across the west of Scotland, the north of Scotland, there is now some green shading, which is indicating that there has been an increasing amount of rain there through the day 5 to day 10 part of the forecast period. But all in all, the wettest conditions for most places are going to be through days 0 to 5, if these are correct, and the rain really, for change, focused on southern and central parts of Britain. In more general terms, how do the deterministic models compare with each other towards the end of the first week? Here is the GFS, which the animations were based on. At this point, the high pressure is beginning to migrate northeastwards to Scandinavia, but it's keeping things mainly dry. The Canadian model also has high pressure dominating, as does the German icon and the European ECM, but this one possibly suggesting that the high pressure is going to be building a little bit further eastwards and further southwards, increasing the chance for southerly or southwesterly flow moving across the UK rather than the easterly, which the GFS goes on to show in the days which follow. The UK Met Office global model, finally, this is perhaps closer to the GFS in some ways. There are signs here that the high pressure may be migrating towards Scandinavia, but this is as far as the UK Met Office global model goes ahead. So it's really second guessing what would happen in the days which were to follow. The key point though is that it's a mostly settled scenario, at least at this stage. Taking the deterministics together, high pressure looks like it will be dominating towards the end of the first week. The chance therefore of chilly nights if skies clear, the possibility of frost in places, especially the northern half of the UK, not much rain around anywhere. Well, with that mostly settled end to week 1, how do things shape up as we go through week 2? Trends and probabilities are not specifics at this stage. And here is the GEFS, the ensemble model plot for London. Air temperatures across the top, the thick purple line, the mean is close to the thick black line, the 30-year average. It's a little bit misleading again though, as it has been on several recent updates, because the individual lines, each one representing the forecast from one of the model runs, are diverging massively. There's a big spread there. Some bring in very warm upper level air, some keep or bring in cold upper level air. The GFS operational develops an easterly flow, and it is one of the cold runs. It's represented by the thick green line there. And throughout week 2, it's staying well below that 30-year norm, the thick black line. But with that really big spread, the wide range of solutions which is being shown, it's very difficult to be confident about how things will play out. I think much has to do with where high pressure becomes centred. The rain risk, well, there are some spikes there along the bottom, not too many, so it doesn't look overly wet, at least in this part of the UK. 2 metre temperature data table for London, a lot of a light green. Early on, those are runs going for forecast maximums of between 6 and 10 Celsius, so a lot chillier than we've become accustomed to, at least in the south, through the first third of October. Towards the end, the amount of yellow increases, also a little bit of orange, so those runs going for 11 to 15 and 16 to 20. The temperatures trending upwards a little bit through the second half of the second week, back towards the average, if this is to be believed. But as I've already indicated, there is a large spread showing up there at the upper level, and a lot will be dependent upon where high pressure decides to park itself. Up to Manchester, the air temperature profile is very similar, so I'll not discuss that. In terms of rain, perhaps a few more spikes there, and some of them are bigger than they were on the London chart, so a little bit wetter, but even here I would expect there to be a reasonable amount of dry periods. 2 metre temperatures for Manchester, not too dissimilar to the London plot. Quite a lot of green there, the light green 6 to 10s, the amount of yellow and orange increasing later on, so that upwards trend perhaps through the second half of the second week. Glasgow, very similar. Air temperature profile, big spread, quite a few runs going cooler, quite a few going warmer. The rain risk not really varying a great deal. There are a number of spikes there, so there's an ongoing chance of rain, but also some reasonable dry periods, I would think, even in the northwest. The snow row across the bottom, the number of runs forecasting snow on a given day reaches a peak of 2, so it's still, of course, very low. The maximum value it can have is 33. Keep an eye on this through the coming weeks. The 2 metre temperature data table for Glasgow, lots of the light green, so on the whole, values are lower than they were further south. Maximums are between 6 and 10, a little bit of yellow, and also that tends to increase through the second half of week 2. It's worth, at this time of year, keeping an eye on the frost risk, I think, because it's starting to increase quite sharply now as we go through the second half of October into November, as would be expected. I've brought up the minimum forecast temperatures for a central location. I've pulled out Nottingham because I think it's reasonably representative. The dark greens are showing overnight lows of between 1 and 5 Celsius, so generally low enough for a ground frost to form, at least possibly to form. Much will depend on things like cloud cover and wind strengths. But there is quite a lot of the dark green there, well over half of the runs on some nights. The light green, minimums of between 6 and 10, also make up quite a lot of the space in the columns. That I would suggest that through the second week, there is quite a high chance, at least, of ground frost in central and northern parts of the UK on some nights. The chance in the south tending to be lower, but certainly not insignificant, even in parts of southern Britain. Rainfall, using the ECM ensemble data, these show the chance of 5 or more millimetres of rain falling on each of the individual days. The first half of week 2, quite dry it looks to begin with, but by day 10 the percentage chance of 5 millimetres or more of rain falling has increased significantly. The greatest risk, though, in the north and the west. And on the days 11, 12 and 13 charts, the wettest conditions also look likely to be in northern and western parts of the United Kingdom. The GEFS mean surface level pressure plot for Saturday the 21st of October is suggesting that high pressure will be centred to the east, maybe the northeast of the United Kingdom, so close to Scandinavia. But as I've mentioned in the past, with these mean plots, all they are doing is averaging out all of the individual forecasts from within the ensemble. So when there's a big spread of solutions like there is on the current updates, they aren't necessarily representative of what to expect. But I think the takeaway here is probably that high pressure will be having a good deal of influence, or there's a significant likelihood that it will be, but where exactly it will be centred is open to debate, and how much influence the Atlantic will be having. But it really ties in with those ECM plots showing the wettest conditions in the west of the United Kingdom, a greater risk of weather fronts pushing in from the Atlantic and hitting those areas. So, to summarise, week 1, through the first 2 or 3 days, there will be heavy outbreaks of rain in the southern half of the United Kingdom. It then turns colder from the north and the frost risk increases significantly. Saturday night may be particularly chilly in much of the UK. There will be some showers around, mostly in the north and the west, and with that colder air mass, temperatures will be low enough for them to turn wintry over high ground in Scotland. Week 2, mainly settled to begin with, but the risk of rain tends to increase through the period, especially in the south and the west, with high pressure starting to be eroded by Atlantic weather systems. Temperatures fluctuate, but close to average overall. Although, as I've discussed, there is quite a lot of uncertainty and much will depend on the exact positioning of that area of high pressure. There is still the possibility through week 2 of some rather cold nights. So, there we have it. A change is on the way. Finally, it's going to be turning cooler or even colder, and many parts of the UK could see their first frost of the autumn. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. As ever, if you did, then please consider hitting the like button below and subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. And remember that you can stay up to date with the day-to-day weather developments by checking out the TheWeatherOutlook.com website. Thanks very much now. Bye.